I'm James Ford, and I have the enormous privilege of being one of the 2 consulting ministers here at First Unitarian Church of Los Angeles. Welcome to our visiting Zen community, as well as our Unitarian Universalist community, and everybody in between. Let's reflect on the spiritual path just a little. Let's consider the moment of our heart's turn. That grace when we are gifted with noticing the world with new eyes, where we discover the world is not how we thought it was. When our certainties loosen their death grip and we catch a glimpse of a larger life. In Zen, this word is Kensho, seeing into who we really are. Another term of art for this moment in Zen is satori, to know or understand. Kenshos are mysterious invitations into joy. A strange joy, a mysterious joy, sometimes a terrible joy. The words are slippery. What is who we really are? What is known or understood? And joy. What does that mean? Now, one can try to present the matter logically, spelling out processes and encounters, and there is merit there, no doubt. But this is a matter of the heart. It's about how we live in this world. We need to make sure our bodies come along with our minds. So, one can tell stories. In my life, I found stories actually more helpful when approaching these deeper matters of joy and sorrow, of how we meet this world. So, with that. In my late 20s, I began to cobble together a hodgepodge of a self-directed education. I was a high school dropout, but also I worked in a large used bookstore, and I turned it into my private university. Mostly I followed my nose, but I did on occasion take advice, and I was told it could be helpful to read Marcel Proust's magnum opus, Remembrance of Things Past. Yeah, I got a hoop. That's you world. Here's where we get an amen. It's really big if you're not familiar with it, and I took it as something of a challenge. I chose the Modern Library 7-volume edition. It was cheap, and I could carry the individual volumes without any trouble, which was important as I read the first 4 volumes pretty much entirely while waiting for and riding the bus to and from work. Those 4 volumes took me about a year. I read other things during the day and evening, just so you know. Then, as I began the 5th volume, I got so caught up in the book, I consumed the last 3 volumes in a single month. Sort of gobbled them down in large gulps. That book lingers in my mind's eye. Taking the whole thing together, it encompassed multiple worlds. I fully understand how it became one of the great monuments of literature. While I've never attempted a reread, it continues to have a place in how I meet the world, in my sense of who I am. One passage especially caught me. It would seem I'm not alone in this, but it really touched me personally. It was a major pointer, helping me to unpack my own life experiences. That passage, echoing the style of the book itself, is a bit long. It meanders sort of like one of those great rivers, a Mississippi of the heart. The sometimes gentle roll, this occasional flooding, all of it becoming, at least for me, irresistible. Of course, if you've read the book, it's not about a river. It's about his meeting with a Madeline. At the time, I had to look it up. It's a kind of cake, although it looks more like a kind of cookie in our American usage. The passage. And soon, mechanically, weary after a dull day, with the prospect of a depressing morrow, I raised to my lips a spoonful of the tea in which I had soaked a morsel of the cake. No sooner had the warm liquid and crumbs with it touched my palate than a shudder ran through my whole body. And I stopped, intent on the extraordinary changes that were taking place. An exquisite pleasure had invaded my senses, but individual, detached, with no suggestion of its origin. And at once, the vicissitudes of life had become indifferent to me. I think of that moment, of that taste, of that meeting, that simple joy which seems to open into some mystery. Valentin Louis Georges Eugene Marcel Proust was born in Paris on the 10th of July, 1871. The eldest of two sons in a well-to-do family, their father Catholic, their mother Jewish. In deference to various things, they were raised Catholic. It is said that as he aged, Proust became, quote, an atheist and was something of a mystic. I rather like that combination of contradictions. I identify with similar juxtapositions, a place of both and. It is a pause that invites surprises, sort of a plot of flowers at the edge of a forest. You never know what will sport out among the tamer crops. The well-to-do proved critical for Proust. Except for a brief period of military service, he remained in his parents' home until their deaths. Mostly an invalid throughout his life, he rarely left his bedroom. He died in 1922, only 51. Thanks to his brother, a prominent surgeon who saw the genius and made sure the book was published, Proust is renowned for his magisterial novel. I've already used the term magnum opus. It really deserves these words. Now, I wrote down the French title. I will not humiliate myself on 3 platforms with that. But it's translated variously as Remembrance of Things Past and In Search of Lost Time, which is my favorite version of the title. 7 volumes, ran approximately 3,200 pages. Actually, in the modern library version, I read 4,300. I looked it up. Remembrance of Things Past was called the greatest novel of the 20th century by Graham Greene, and rather more grandly, the greatest novel to date by Somerset Maugham. Although I also note Anatole France is said to have said, life is too short and Proust is too long. In that spirit of both and, I suspect they're all correct. At the time I read that passage about the Madeleine, I thought, oh my, is that a Kensho experience? Zen's word for the turning of the heart toward wisdom, for seeing beyond the dreams and stories we tell ourselves, pointing directly into the real of the world. This is the heart of the spiritual quest, to know for one's self the realities of this universe as some great unfolding. To find those awakenings of our heart are essential for us to have direction. They birth for us as a north star, perhaps even the star that appeared above Bethlehem. But for us, you and me, I'm especially taken with how this particular pointing comes from a world-class neurotic who barely could get himself out of bed, someone who preferred cork-lined walls and his pen to any kind of actual human encounter. And yet, he was able to point true. The Spirit, it turns out, really does rest where it will. Proust himself reflected on what happened and offers a perspective out of the experience, something I found useful. Later in the novel, he writes, "1 minute freed from the order of time has repeated in us in order to feel it, the person freed from the order of time, and because of that, we can understand why we rush our joy. And even if the simple taste of a Madeleine does not seem logically to contain reasons for this joy, we can understand how the word death has no meaning. Situated outside of time, why should we fear for the future?" I love this pointing to something of the human heart's desire to encounter with our own lives the call of all the world's religions into, well, something where the words begin to fail, get shaky, even completely collapse. Although, in fact, once loosened a bit, words prove how they are magical things. Angels, if you will, in the sense of messengers. At least if we allow them their play, as in a novel, as in a koan. Then we can receive the message. We can find ourselves pointed to a taste of that small cake for ourselves. To find in our own bodies, as our own bodies, something bound in time and beyond time, all at once. Something wonderful, no doubt. And something important, a North Star for our lives. Of course, it's important to note that while it was a taste, here it could be something you see or hear or meet with any of the senses. Each part of who we are can be a door into wonder if we allow ourselves to meet what we meet in the intimate way. The secret of our bodies, the secret of the universes, is instantly revealed. People make a lot of whether any given insight is slight or deep. I suggest that's actually none of our business. If we take on the intimate way, these tastes, these moments, as the teacher Joko Beck uniformly called them, these small intimations, each in fact simply invite us further into a journey. A journey that began before we were born, and a journey that continues well on past these moments, even gloriously crumbly moments like that Madeleine. They're not the culmination, they're a door. They're a signpost. They're a gate swung wide. Walk through. And then the journey continues. Still, they're important, critical even. In my own life as a student of Zen, I was living in a monastery in that ever-exotic Oakland, of which Gertrude Stein whispered, "There is no there there." For me, a delightful pointing toward the mysteries of Zen as well as Oakland, city of my birth. In that monastery, during a meal that featured the thinnest of thin broths, I had an encounter with a cabbage leaf. I've described it before, and honestly, I'm finding the retelling less and less helpful. The important thing is how it was for me an invitation into immediacy, into intimacy. So, a year or two later, after I left the monastery, and as I read about that Madeleine, it seemed obvious to me Proust and I touched something similar. There are hundreds, thousands of stories about this meeting. Those are two. Let me offer just one more. One of the Zen teachers I most admire is the Japanese Rinzai master Yamada Muman. In his study of the ox herding pictures, Zen's wonderful map of the human heart, when he comes around to his own pointing into the moment of the opened heart, he tells a story. Of course, it would be a story. It's about an encounter between Ipin Shonen, himself a wonderful and complicated 13th century Japanese spiritual seeker and teacher, and the Rinzai Zen master Shinichi Kakushin. Kakushin Roshi had studied with several teachers in Japan, including the founder of my own school, the Soto school, Eihei Dogen. Eventually he went to China, where he studied under Woman Hui Kei, the compiler of the Koan anthology, The Gateless Gate. It's one of the most important books in the Zen tradition. Later, when Kakushin returned to Japan, he brought a copy of that book with him, a critical moment for Zen in Japan. Maybe as an aside, and more interesting to those of us not doing Zen, in popular Japanese culture, Kakushin Roshi is also said to have introduced soy sauce into the country. I would say Gateless Gate, soy sauce, near equal importance. Ipin Shonen, on the other hand, had been a monk of the Tendai school, a broadly eclectic spiritual tradition that allowed a variety of directions. For him, he understood the study of Pure Land Buddhism, a teaching based on the observation we appear to be living in the last age, where matters are so corrupt that we can't achieve enlightenment on our own. Fortunately, there's a Buddha in another dimension who made a vow that if someone called on his name, he would gather that person into his world, the Western paradise, the Pure Land, where awakening would be as easy as the unfolding of a flower. The spiritual practice for Pure Land Buddhism is called, in Japanese, Nembutsu. It consists of the phrase, praise to the Buddha of infinite light. In Japanese, Namu Amida Butsu. You can think of it like a mantra, although some would dispute that characterization. Like any authentic spiritual practice, it is a lot messier than any simplistic description. Ipin's father died when he was 25, and he took off his robes, married, and assumed his household responsibilities. But he continued his practices during a pilgrimage, a kami, that's a local god. I think of kami more as moments where time and place collapse into dreams. Appeared and informed him he should tell people about the Nembutsu, which he did as an ecstatic, including dancing with the mantra. I'd never heard of this before I started digging into his biography. A dancing mantra seems just about what everybody needs, but that's for a different conversation. However, Ipin didn't leave it at that, even the wonders of a dancing mantra and the instant manifestation of the body. He knew there were many gates, and he was sure he could go deeper into the mystery. So he also undertook Zen practice under the guidance of Kakushin Roshi. Master Muman tells about this. At one point, the Pure Land ecstatic shared a poem with his Zen teacher, a traditional way of expressing one's spiritual state. Quote, "In chanting there is neither self nor Buddha, only the sound of Namu Amida Butsu." The Zen teacher replied, "Nice, but you're not yet mature." Ipin bowed and continued his contemplation. Soon he came back with a new verse. "In chanting, there is neither self nor Buddha. Namu Amida Butsu. Namu Amida Butsu." Perhaps you can feel how close he's getting. Maybe you can even catch a sense of Marcel Proust and his Madeline. Of course, Kakushin tells him, better, but not intimate enough. Ipin then asked for direct explanation, and the Rinzai teacher spontaneously recited, "In chanting there is neither self nor Buddha. Over the back pond, the wind is sighing. A friend is walking outside in the garden." Perhaps you can feel the breeze, which is no other than the chant, which is no other than our very lives. Cabbage leaves and madeleines, crumbs that I can taste at this moment. Angels with messages for those ready to hear. The part that I feel really important to notice about these graces, larger and smaller, is how visceral they are, how intimate to who we are as beings. As I've noted, there are 800 gates into this intimate moment. Those closest at hand for us are our senses. Seeing, smelling, touching, tasting, hearing. And Buddhists like to point out the perceiving mind itself. And this is an important but we need to understand this invitation is into something alive and dynamic. It is also something that a Jewish Catholic atheist can notice in a cookie, that a former Baptist boy finds in a cabbage leaf in a Buddhist monastery, that a Pure Land wanderer can find in meeting with a Zen teacher and swapping poems. In a moment, each of our senses can and do invite us to notice. It's about being freed from the order of time, if just for a few heartbeats. And for me, at least in this encounter, discovering not just gratitude, not even joy precisely, but a certain sympathy with the whole of creation. Be careful. Each of these words are magic things, pointing as they are to the deeper possibility of our being, toward that North Star. The psychologist, advocate of dreams and mysteries, James Hillman, tells us words like angels are powers which have invisible power over us. I love the connection between words and angels, both as mysterious entities with powers that we are not necessarily aware of or totally understand. And as I consider gratitude and joy and sympathy, I feel, yes, the moments of disruption of the way we think things are without a doubt divine visitations, angels. James Hillman sings to us, open your heart, your gaze to the visitations of angels, even if the gifts they bring may not be centeredness and balance, but eccentricity and a wholly unfamiliar sense of pleasure called joy. Joy again. For me, the great project of insight, of wisdom, has not been a path leading me to calm depths. Rather, it has been Mr. Toad's wild ride. No doubt, the intimate way is, in its various manifestations, offers paths to a certain mysterious joy. A joy that mixes up loss and grief, beauty that breaks the heart, and madeleines and cabbage leaves and absolutely poems. That joy that arises in the face of seeing how everything and everyone is in fact dying from the moment we birth into this world. That joy of discovering we are more intimate than sisters and brothers. Of course, there is sadness. Of course, longing and hurt and loss. Of course, all the range of emotions are packed into that strange joy. No wonder one of the traditional images of this spiritual path is war. A dangerous image, but one we completely discard at our peril. That said, at the heart of it all, coming from the side, from the corner of the eye, well, not an eye, not someone's eye, my eye, your eye, something never quite capturable, is that mysterious joy. As Hillman sings to us, we would like otherworldly visitors to come as distinct voices with clear instructions, but they may only give small signs in dreams, or as sudden hunches and insights that cannot be denied. They feel more as if they emerge from inside and steer you from within, like an inner guardian angel. To which there is an addendum. And most amazing, it has never forgotten you, although you may have spent most of your life ignoring it. Like a madeleine, like a cabbage leaf, like a poem. So, my advice, be ready for the unexpected. be ready for heartbreak and be ready to be surprised by joy. But be warned, it's a fierce joy. It's a terrible joy. It's confusion and wonder, like an angel appearing from heaven with a message, pointing us to new worlds. Amen.